All right, so this week we are working our way through the American Revolution. We talked about the Declaration of Independence, which is our official declaration of independence. We talked about the strengths and weaknesses of both sides as we head into actual fighting. And today we're going to begin the first of a two-part lesson on the actual war itself. Okay, so we're going to get through the first part of the war this week, and then we'll finish up the war next week. All right, and you can see on this timeline, we're going to start back in 1774 and work our way down to 1783, 1784. Okay, so it's about a 10-year span that we're going to look at over the next couple of lessons. All right, now we got to go all the way back to 1774. All right, keep in mind, we've had the Boston Massacre in 1770. We've had the Boston Tea Party in 1773, and that resulted in the Intolerable Acts. Okay, and that's where we're going to pick up the story. Because while all that is happening, the colonies are beginning to realize we need to start acting together, okay? That's the whole reason we watched The Story of a Patriot, if you were with me in class, this idea that what happens in Massachusetts has implications for people all over the colonies. It impacts people in Virginia. It impacts people in Georgia, okay? So there's been this big push for the colonies to start acting together as one. And the first time we're going to act together as one is in 1774 at the First Continental Congress. Okay, so 1774 is the First Continental Congress. All the colonies except for Georgia sent representatives to Philadelphia in September of 1774. And I believe the reason Georgia didn't send representatives is by the time everybody got there to meet, Georgia being at the bottom, it takes the Georgia representatives a little bit longer to get there. Okay, so I believe that's why Georgia doesn't send anybody to this First Continental Congress. Now, it is the first time the colonies have acted together as one, and what they want this time is an end to those intolerable acts. Okay, closing the port of Boston, getting rid of the Massachusetts colonial legislature, saying that British soldiers would be tried in England rather than in the United States or whether in the colonies. We want to get rid of those. And to prove that we are serious about this and that we want England to take us seriously and that we want England to pay attention, we also agree to cut off trade with Britain. Okay. Now, this is also, I believe, a compromise with the radicals, because the radicals, remember, the radicals would be advocating for independence and advocating for revolution right now. They also advocated for cutting off all trade with Britain. We are still trying to work things out. Okay, like right now, we just want relief from the Intolerable Acts. Then we can talk about other taxes. We can talk about the troops that are here that we don't want here anymore. So we're still trying to work out things with Great Britain, which the radicals are not going to care for. Okay, but if we throw them an olive branch, if we give them a little something, they back us up. So we agree, hey, we will cut off all trade with Great Britain. That will show we are serious about, hey, we want you to take us seriously. We want you to pay attention to us. And who knows, maybe it will push Britain to listen to us, okay? And maybe we will get something positive out of this. All right. So we agree to cut off trade with Great Britain. We also agree to meet again in 1775, okay? If there has been no word from Britain, we agree to meet again in 1775, and this time we're going to be talking about war. Now, between the First Continental Congress and the Second Continental Congress, guess what happens? War. War breaks out. In 1775, the war begins, okay? So keep in mind, I mean, this is not what everybody had in mind, all right? We were going to give them one more chance, and then we were going to start talking about war. Well, between the First Continental Congress and the Second Continental Congress, things quickly get out of hand, okay? In April 19th, 1775, the British try to take control of arms in Concord and in Lexington. Okay, they march out of Boston, headed toward Concord and Lexington. They want arms and ammunition in both places. Also, Sam Adams and John Hancock are in the area. Okay, and they want to capture John Hancock and Sam Adams and bring an end to this, colonial uprising. Okay, it's really not an uprising, but if we capture the leaders, maybe that will make the colonies fall in line. Paul Revere and William Dawes ride out from Boston to warn the colonists. Okay, Paul Revere actually gets captured. Okay, William Dawes is going to ride longer than Paul Revere and farther than Paul Revere, but Paul Revere kind of gets all the attention. Also, he probably was not shouting as often as depicted in movies and stories and stuff like that. He probably was not shouting, "The British are coming! The British are coming! The British are coming!" We wouldn't know who that was. Okay. In fact, we're still seeing ourselves as British colonists right now. So when you say the British are coming, are you talking about the British troops or are you talking about my neighbor down the street? Okay. Because we kind of see ourselves as British. He probably was shouting, "The regulars are coming." Okay. That would specifically refer to the British Army. All right. And that would be a difference between just the British are coming. If you said the regulars are coming, you would know who they were. Okay, it's the army, it's the soldiers. All right. So Paul Revere and William Dawes ride out to warn the colonists. Well, the colonists start waking up, and the British march to Lexington first. Okay, and at Lexington, there's a group of Minutemen waiting on the British. Okay, they are at the village green, which is kind of in the center of the town. And here come the British up the road. The road comes into the village green. So here come the British up the road. Here are the Minutemen kind of lined up. All right. And there's this very, very uneasy standoff. Okay. The British kind of march out and they form their line, and the Minutemen are in their line. And then everybody stops. Okay. Because both sides have been ordered not to fire. All right. And the British tell the colonists to disperse. Okay. That they're coming through, and nothing happens. And then someone somewhere, and we are not sure if it was from the colonist side or if it was from the British side, but someone somewhere fires a shot. And it is called the shot heard around the world. And of course, once one person starts to fire, and considering you don't know where the shot is coming from, once one person starts to fire, everybody opens fire. Okay. And some of the Minutemen die. Okay, and those that are left quickly disperse, they flee. Okay, once people are dead, they run away. All right, now this is called the shot heard around the world because this is considered the official start of the American Revolution. Okay, it's the opening shots, it's the opening skirmish. It's not the first official battle. We'll talk about the first official battle in just a second, but it is definitely the opening shots. Okay, well, the British march out of Lexington. By the way, they don't get any guns and ammunition. They march out of Lexington going to Concord. By the time they get to Concord, the guns and ammunition have been moved. So has Sam Adams and John Hancock. Okay. And there are more Minutemen ready to fight them at Concord. Okay. Well, the British have strict orders not to engage. So they begin to turn around and march back to Boston. All along the way, okay, our troops, our Minutemen, the people from Concord, start to harass the British. Okay. And we talked about one of the British weaknesses is they are used to fighting on equal terms. This is a good example how we're not going to fight equally. Okay. We start harassing them and firing at them from behind walls and behind trees and behind rocks. Okay. From ditches. All right. And we start to fire at them all the way back to Boston. Now, sometimes occasionally they will return fire, okay, but we harass them all the way back. And by the time they get to Boston, they're in disorder. Several of them have been killed. So this first skirmish technically goes to the colonists, okay, because we harass them all the way back to Boston. The British end up going back to Boston. Okay. And they don't get anything that they were supposed to get. They don't get guns. They don't get ammunition. They don't capture Sam Adams and John Hancock. So this is kind of seen as a colonial victory and a British failure. Okay. Now, the first official battle of the American Revolution is the Battle of Bunker Hill. Okay. It is in May of 1775 near Boston. Okay. It's called the Battle of Bunker Hill. Technically, Breed's Hill is the official name for it. Okay. But you can see here in this illustration This is Bunker Hill, okay? And notice who's up at the top? Us, okay? The colonists, okay? The British have to march up to us, all right? And we've got these nice earthenwork barricades up here, this nice earthenwork fort, all right? So we're at the top of the hill, the British are at the bottom, and they have to march out, okay? Now, some military tactics. If you're in a battle, where do you want to be? Do you want to be at the top of the hill or the bottom of the hill? You want to be at the top, okay? It is much easier to fire down than it is to try to march and fire up as you're moving, okay? The colonists are outnumbered and outgunned, but we're at the top of the hill and we are winning. In fact, we would probably have won the Battle of Bunker Hill if we had not run out of ammunition, okay? And because we run out of ammunition, we end up surrendering, all right? So the British win this battle, but it is a big morale victory for us because we were facing off against a much larger, better equipped British army, and we were winning. In fact, we probably would have won if we hadn't run out of ammunition. Plus, at the end of the day, when the bodies are counted, we killed more of them than they killed of us, okay? We actually kill about 50% of the British. Now, part of that is because we're at the top of the hill, and like I said, it's easier to be at the top and fire down than to be at the bottom and have to be moving and firing at the same time, especially when you're trained to move in lines, okay, and move in nice battle squares and stuff like that. So even though we lose, it is a big morale victory for us because we were holding off a much larger, better equipped British force, and we inflict more casualties on them than they do on us. Now it's time for the Second Continental Congress to meet. Okay, so they met in 1774. They said they were going to reach out to Britain one more time. Okay, and if Britain hadn't gotten back to us, they were going to start talking about war. Well, guess what? We've had two clashes with the British. We had the opening skirmish at Lexington Concord, and now we've had the first official battle at Bunker Hill. All right, so 1775, we get the Second Continental Congress. Now they are starting to make plans for war. Okay, they're going to begin to organize the Continental Army, all right, which is the Colonial Army or the Continental Army. It will be backed up by local militia units, okay? So you're going to have the professional army, the Continental Army, with the local militia as support, okay? And we talk about that's actually one of the weaknesses is Washington has difficulty with these often untrained militias, okay? So we're going to form a Continental Army, and probably the smartest move is we're going to make George Washington commander-in-chief, okay? He had, and the reason I say this is probably the best move, he had experience because of his time serving during the French and Indian War. Okay, so he's got military experience. He's also a very, very good leader. People on both sides respect him. There are radicals that respect him. There are more moderates that respect him. He himself is kind of a moderate. Okay, so his leadership style is good. His fighting ability is good. And to top it all off, he knows that he needs to avoid any situation in which his whole army could be destroyed. As long as he keeps the army together, all right, he can't be defeated. All right, so that's the deal. As long as we keep an army in the field, things are going to be okay. All right, and I told you in the strengths and weaknesses PowerPoint, he would march his army out and get them lined up for battle, and then here come the British, and then he would promptly retreat, and it infuriates the British. It also kind of makes him mad because he really wants to fight the old style. Okay, he's used to these British tactics, so it's against his character to want to do this, but he knows as long as the army's in the field, we got a chance. If the army is destroyed completely, our defeat, our independence is going to be destroyed as well. Okay, our destruction is inevitable if something happens to the army. All right, so his big deal is to keep an army in the field. All right, now believe it or not, the delegates at the Second Continental Congress send what they call the olive branch petition to King George III. Okay. Once again, they are reaching out. All right. We don't want to go to war. All right. Even though we've had these two battles and things like that. And I bet you they're putting things out there like, don't forget, the Battle of Bunker Hill. We inflicted 50% casualties on you guys. Okay. So we're ready for a fight. But they're trying to reach out one more time and try to get peace with the British. Okay. Now, whether or not they expect George III to listen or not, that's up for debate, okay? But they're trying one more time to end this thing peacefully. Of course, when the Olive Branch petition comes to George III, well, the petition urged to return to the former harmony between the British and her colonies, okay? We want to go back to the way things were between the British and our colonies. Again, they're probably also asking for representation. Like, we are glad to be part of the British Empire, but you need to give us representation, especially if you're going to tax us. Okay. Now, when this shows up in the court of George III flatly rejects the petition. Okay. And he issues a proclamation stating the colonies are in rebellion and we are at war. Okay. Because if you're going to put down a rebellion, you're going to have to fight. All right. So there is literally no turning back now for either side. All right. Any hopes that we're going to end this peacefully and make things better are quickly gone. Okay. George just ignores our petition and, in fact, one ups us by saying, you guys are in rebellion. We're going to fight. Okay. And now we have to fight. So that's where we're going. Okay. Now, since George has issued his proclamation, okay, we've got to issue our proclamation. And we've got to justify to ourselves and to the world why we are doing that. And that is going to come in 1776 with the Declaration of Independence. We talked about this earlier this week with the lesson that we did on freedom. Okay. Declaration of Independence written by good old TJ, Thomas Jefferson from Virginia. Okay. We officially break away from England. And this struggle that we are in is to preserve our freedom. Okay. And the way that Jefferson does this, he explains the rights of man, all right, with influence from John Locke. And he says, we have tried repeatedly to reach out to George III, and George III continually ignores us. And because our rights are being infringed, our freedom is being infringed upon, our only recourse of action is to go to war. And he lists those grievances, those problems against the king, just like Thomas Paine in Common Sense. Okay. So between the influence of Locke and the influence of Paine, Jefferson makes a good argument. This is why we're going to war. And not only does that justify it for us, but it justifies us to other countries. Okay. Our rights are being infringed upon. We've tried. George is saying no. Here are the problems that we have with George that he's not addressing. And we've got to go to war. Okay. Now, this is where Washington comes in. Washington's got to keep an army in the field because as long as there's an army in the field, there's hope. Because each one of these guys that signed the Declaration of Independence, okay, each one of those gentlemen that signed that is signing their death warrant. This is considered an act of treason, okay? The king has said as much. He says we are in open rebellion. And now we are declaring that with the Declaration of Independence. So if Washington can't keep an army in the field and his army gets destroyed, our hopes of independence are going to be destroyed. But more importantly, every single man in this room right here has the potential to be hung as a traitor. Okay? Ben Franklin, Thomas Jefferson, John Adams, John Hancock, all right? Every single man in that room could be hung as a traitor if we don't survive this. Which is why it's so vital that Washington keep that army out there, because as long as the army's in the field, no matter how badly it gets beaten, there's hope. Okay? Now, outside of Lexington and Concord and outside of our kind of morale booster at Bunker Hill, the first part of the war goes exclusively to the British. Okay? The British continually win. There's an initial rush to join the Continental Army. But the longer it's in the field and the more that the British win against the colonists, that desire to fight for freedom kind of cools in some people. And I'll be honest with you, the Army falls from 20,000 to just 6,000. All right. But as long as there's 6,000, we still have hope. All right. But that shows you, how bad it is for us. And then I'm not saying that the 14,000 were all killed in battle. Some of them desert. Okay, some of them desert, some of them are captured, some of them get sick. All right, and then you do have casualties during the course of the fighting, but the numbers drop from 20,000 to 6,000. Also, at this point in time, the fighting is going to be exclusively in the New England colonies and the middle colonies. We haven't begun really a lot in the South. That's coming. Okay, so the British start in Massachusetts with Boston, and they make their way down through New York and into Pennsylvania. Okay, of course, they're heading for Philadelphia because that's where the Continental Congress has been meeting. All right, so the British are on the move, heading ever closer to Philadelphia. They're moving through New York and Pennsylvania. Now, Washington knows he needs a game changer. Okay, we got to keep an army in the field, but we also got to win. If we win, we can prove to ourselves, we can prove to others that we're in this fight till the end, and it will probably help with all these guys that are leaving. And the victory that Washington needs is going to come in 1776 at Trenton. Okay, December 1776 at Trenton. On Christmas Day, Washington crosses the Delaware River. Okay, Washington crosses the Delaware River on Christmas Day. Okay, actually late Christmas Day. He is headed from Pennsylvania to New Jersey, to a British outpost in New Jersey. Now, why does he decide to attack on Christmas, at Christmas? What do people tend to do at Christmas? They party. And that's exactly what the British, and more importantly, with their German Hessians that they have hired to fight for them, that's what they've been doing, is they've been partying, and Washington knows that. And he's hoping to use that to his advantage. So on Christmas, he crosses the Delaware River. Now, this is probably a very inaccurate picture of the crossing of the Delaware, okay? Number one, Washington would have been standing up like that, okay? Would have toppled the boat. There probably weren't these large chunks of ice in the river either, okay? It probably was not that ice, all right? And then you got horses and stuff like that over there. Not sure where the horses went over. So this is a very inspiring painting. It's very patriotic painting, but it's probably not that accurate. Okay. And in the boat with Washington are Alexander Hamilton and a young James Monroe. Okay. James Monroe is also going to become president of the United States later on down the road. Okay. He's going to be the 5th president of the United States. All right. So anyway, here comes Washington across. He makes it across, and on December the 26th, okay, 1776, he and his troops attack the British fort at Trenton the day after Christmas. All right. And what he hoped was going to happen happens. He caught the British, he caught the Hessians off guard and drunk. Okay. Because they've been partying the night before because it was Christmas. And nobody would attack on Christmas. Okay. So he caught them off guard, and he kills or captures 1,000 of the 1,300 soldiers in that British outpost. Okay. And he does it without losing a man. All right. Washington himself does not have any casualties. He captures or kills 1,000 of them, leaving only 300 left. Then he does what he's supposed to do. He goes in, he does his business, and then he gets out of Dodge as quickly as possible. And he recrosses the Delaware into Pennsylvania. All right. And the effect that he has, or the effect that he hoped for, is what happens. All right. It's a big boost in colonial morale, and a bunch of those people that have deserted are going to come back. Okay. Many people are going to rejoin the army. He does it also at the perfect time, because this is when there are seasons of fighting. Okay. You tend to fight in the spring and the summer and the fall. And then in the winter, you go into your winter headquarters. So Washington scores this big victory, and then he and his army kind of go into winter headquarters to prepare for the next campaign. All right. Which is good, because then we got all these deserters and all these new recruits coming back to us. Okay. So when he gets ready to go out again in the spring, he's going to have more troops. Now, Washington's biggest competition on the British side is Lord Cornwallis. Okay, he is the commander of the British. He got a lot of those early military victories. All right, and he's going to be successful up in New England colonies and up in the middle colonies, and then he's going to move down south. But he never is able to get rid of Washington. Okay, remember I said Washington's goal is to keep an army in the field. Cornwallis never destroys Washington or his army completely. Okay, so there's Lord Cornwallis right there, and there's George Washington. All right, so he never completely is able to outfox Washington. Washington stays in the field up until the end of the war. Okay, so Cornwallis is the big British general. Washington is our big continental general. Now, that's going to move us up to the summer of 1777. So we had this big victory at Trenton in the winter, okay, in December of 1776. Then both armies kind of move into their winter headquarters, and now we're ready to fight again. And in the summer of 1777, we get the Battle of Saratoga. Now, we are going to win the Battle of Saratoga. We are going to win the Battle of Saratoga in the face of a vastly superior British army. Okay? Now, why this is so significant is while we're fighting over here, Ben Franklin has gone to France. And remember, I said the French were angry at the end of the French and Indian War, but they're back in Europe kind of plotting their revenge. Here comes their revenge. Franklin goes over to negotiate a treaty of alliance with the French, because we know the French and the British are hated enemies. We also figure that the French want to get back at the British for the French and Indian War. So we've kind of been sending out, feelers. Hey, would you guys want to team up with us and defeat the British? The French are at first hesitant about this, okay, because we really haven't proven that we can win. We did a good job at Lexington Concord. We did a good job at Bunker Hill. But other than that, okay, we haven't really shown that we can win against the British in a full-fledged fight, all right? We had the victory at Trenton as well, but let's be honest, that was because the British and the Hessians were drunk, okay? How are we going to do it face-to-face fighting? So while Franklin is over there trying to negotiate this treaty of alliance with the French, news comes, we have won at Saratoga. Okay, the victory at Saratoga is going to bring the French in to the war on our side. They're going to send over troops. They're going to send over a navy, okay, which is going to be a big deal because we don't really have a navy to fight the British with. And they're also going to pay for our troops, all right? So that's a big deal. So the French kind of bring in all this stuff with us. Saratoga is considered one of the turning points of the war. By the way, Spain and the Netherlands also fought with the colonists. Okay, Spain and the Netherlands also sent troops over. It wasn't just the French. All right, but Saratoga is going to be considered one of the biggest turning points of the war. Okay, the colonial victory not only proved that we could compete with a larger and better equipped British army, it also brings the French in, or helps kind of cement the deal to bring the French in on our side. Okay. Now, last year I was at the Social Studies Conference in Williamsburg, and I was talking. There was a gentleman there from the American Revolution Museum at Yorktown, and he was reminding us Saratoga is a big deal. We need to pay attention to it, but he's not sure it is exactly the turning point. It's probably one of the turning points. Okay, but it's the summer of 1777. The war doesn't end until October 1781. Okay, so we still got 4 years to go here of fighting, and then we've got the peace process to work out. Okay, so while it is a big deal, we prove we can compete against a larger, much better equipped British army in head to head combat. While it does bring the French in on our side, okay, and paves the way for other troops like the Spanish and the Dutch from the Netherlands to come in on our side as well, we still have to prove that we can get the job done, okay? We still have 4 years of fighting to go before this thing comes to a conclusion, all right? And that's where we're going to leave today. We're going to pick up with the end of the war next week. Right now, We're on a very, very high note. We've won at Saratoga. The French are coming in. Things are looking good for us. And we'll pick up from there next week.